You know that feeling when you realize the person you share your bed with, the man you trust implicitly, is living on the razor's edge of a catastrophe? I didn't get that feeling from a confrontation or a suspicious text. I got it from a tiny, crumpled piece of paper that smelled faintly of expensive cigar smoke and fear. That little note proved my husband wasn't just a successful, driven lawyer. He was someone deeply compromised, someone involved in a scheme so dark it threatened to drag our entire life into the shadows. My husband Adrian was a rising star in corporate litigation. We had been married for 8 years. He had the sharp suits, the corner office, the kind of professional reputation that made me feel proud every time someone mentioned his name. We had the perfect life, the kind with quiet Sunday mornings, busy social calendars, and a mutual respect that I thought was unbreakable. Adrian was obsessive about his briefcase. It wasn't just a bag, it was an extension of his professional persona. It was custom leather, always locked with a tiny combination, and it was sacred. Even when he was home, it sat by his desk, untouched by me. "Confidentiality, darling," he'd explain. "Client privilege." And I always respected it. A few months ago, Adrian flew to Geneva for what he called a make-or-break, extremely delicate arbitration. It was a huge case involving a multi-million-dollar corporate merger. He was gone for 12 days, and the entire time he was tense, even on video calls. The day he came back, he was exhausted, but relieved. "We won, Kate," he sighed, collapsing onto the sofa. "Barely. That was the most high-stakes, stressful 2 weeks of my career." He left his briefcase unlocked that evening, an absolute first. He'd been so tired he'd just forgotten. The next morning, he rushed out for an early meeting, completely forgetting to put the lock back on. I noticed it later that afternoon. I was dusting his study, and the leather briefcase was sitting there, gaping slightly open. I instinctively reached for the zipper to close it, worried about the exposed documents. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. I was just being a good wife, tidying up. As I gently lifted the main flap, a small, square, folded note, written on expensive, heavy bond paper, slid out of a side pouch and landed silently on the carpet. It wasn't standard office paper. It looked like the kind of note you'd pass discreetly in a fancy restaurant. I knelt down and picked it up. The handwriting was not Adrian's. It was elegant, slanting script, written in dark blue ink. I unfolded the paper. There were only 2 sentences. The first was a phone number, handwritten in bold, looping digits. The second sentence was the one that hit me like a physical blow. "Call me if you want the divorce papers to disappear." My heart instantly slammed against my ribs. Divorce papers? Adrian and I weren't even fighting. We were fine. Who was threatening him? And why would someone offer to make divorce papers disappear? That didn't sound like a standard legal threat. It sounded like blackmail. It sounded like a crime. I immediately locked myself in the study, my mind racing. My first thought was that he was having an affair, and the mistress's angry husband was threatening to expose him to me and ruin his career. That was the clean version. But Adrian was a divorce lawyer himself. Why would he be handling his own divorce papers in this clandestine way? I grabbed the briefcase again and looked inside with new, panicked eyes. I pulled out stacks of thick legal files, all related to the Geneva case. The names meant nothing to me. Orion Corp., Zenith Holdings, Senator T. I realized Adrian wasn't the target of the divorce. He was handling a client's divorce. But the note was addressed to him. Why would a client write a threat to their own lawyer? Then I saw a confidential memo related to the Geneva arbitration. It detailed the crucial, final negotiation point, a complex financial maneuver involving the transfer of corporate assets just before the merger. The memo noted a highly influential, powerful figure, Senator T, who was opposing the merger because his own interests and possibly his own family's financial future were at stake. I suddenly had a sickening thought. Senator T. Adrian was handling the divorce of Senator T's wife, a bitter multi-million-dollar split happening concurrently with the merger arbitration. I returned to the note. Call me if you want the divorce papers to disappear. This wasn't about our marriage. This was about Adrian using the leverage of a powerful man's messy personal life, his divorce, to gain an advantage in the corporate case he was arguing. He wasn't being threatened. He was the blackmailer. He was using the threat of revealing damaging information in the senator's divorce, maybe hidden assets, maybe embarrassing secrets that would ruin the senator's reputation, to force the senator to green-light the merger. Adrian wasn't just winning a case. He was playing dirty, blurring the line between corporate law and criminal coercion. I checked the number on the note. I didn't dare call it. Instead, I used a private search engine to cross-reference the number with public records. It wasn't a law firm. It was a burner phone registered to a P.O. box in an area of the city known for shady private investigators and less-than-legal businesses. I carefully photographed the note, the number, and the key financial memo with my own phone, hiding the evidence on a secure cloud. I folded the note exactly as I had found it and slipped it back into the briefcase pouch. I closed the zipper, locked the combination, and put the briefcase back by his desk. The room was silent, but my mind was screaming. Adrian walked back into the study a few hours later, still tired, completely unaware of the bomb I had just defused and put back in its casing. He gave me a kiss and went back to organizing his files, the briefcase now safely locked once more. I was living with a man who was not only willing to commit blackmail to win a case, but who was involving himself with figures powerful enough to destroy us both. The question was no longer about marital infidelity. It was about moral and legal contamination, and I had to choose: protect my husband and become complicit, or expose him and destroy our life. After finding the note, every interaction with Adrian felt like walking across thin ice. His successful, charming facade suddenly felt flimsy, revealing the cold, calculating strategist beneath. I watched him closely, searching for any telltale sign of panic or guilt, but he was a master of composure. That professional detachment which I once admired now terrified me. I decided I couldn't confront him without more evidence. If I accused him based solely on the note, he could easily claim I misunderstood, or that the note was a threat against him, twisting the narrative to make me seem paranoid. I needed to know the details of the blackmail. Who was on the other end, and what was the divorce paper secret he was wielding? The next week, Adrian started taking calls late at night in his study, closing the heavy oak door and speaking in hushed, urgent tones. He'd never done that before. Usually, his confidential calls happened at the office. This secrecy suggested the topic was either extremely illegal or intensely personal, or both. I waited until one evening, around 11 p.m. Adrian was deep into one of these calls. I put on a pair of soft slippers, moved silently to the study door, and pressed my ear against the wood, praying I wouldn't be caught. I could only make out fragments, but they were devastating. I told you, Senator T will not budge unless you guarantee the asset transfer is blocked. It's all tied up in the divorce filing. We have the signed affidavit. If that information becomes public, the SEC will shut down the merger and his reputation is finished. Make the papers disappear or the affidavit gets filed. It's simple leverage. Leverage. Not negotiation, not legal strategy. Blackmail. Adrian was not just threatening to reveal a secret, he was holding the financial future of a powerful politician hostage to push his corporate merger through. The divorce papers were merely the vehicle for the senator's hidden, perhaps illegal, financial maneuvering. The affidavit was the key. I quickly returned to my safe location, my stomach churning. I had to know what was in that affidavit. I knew the name of the senator's wife, Mrs. Eleanor T. I started discreetly looking for news about their divorce. It was a messy, public affair, but the financial details were heavily sealed. I remembered Adrian kept a backup digital copy of all his active cases on a secondary external drive, tucked away in a locked cabinet in our spare bedroom. He believed the drive's encryption was impenetrable. I spent the next 3 days doing everything I could to appear normal, cooking his favorite meals, asking about his mundane office life, even suggesting a quiet weekend getaway, anything to keep his attention focused away from his study. While he was at the gym on Saturday morning, I broke into the cabinet. It wasn't hard. The cheap lock was more of a formality. The drive was there. The encryption was indeed complex, but I had once seen Adrian input the key sequence during a power outage. It wasn't a word. It was a complex series of numbers related to our first apartment and his law school graduation year. After 3 tense attempts, the drive opened. I went straight to the Senator T litigation folder. I found the file, Eleanor T Affidavit, Confidential. I opened it and began to read. The affidavit detailed with precise dates and figures how Senator T had been systematically laundering millions of dollars through his wife's blind trust and various offshore shell corporations to fund his political campaigns and avoid massive capital gains taxes on his corporate holdings. The divorce filing was about to expose all of it. Adrian had this damning, highly illegal financial data in his possession, and he was using it as a weapon. The danger suddenly expanded far beyond a simple legal ethics violation. Adrian wasn't just blackmailing a senator, he was exposing a sophisticated network of illegal finance. People involved in these kinds of operations don't just lose the game, they make problems disappear. And I, the wife who now knew the secret, was suddenly a liability. The revelation hit me with crushing force. Adrian wasn't fighting a case. He was fighting powerful, corrupt people. I knew I had to act, and I had to protect myself first. If I went to the authorities, I would immediately destroy Adrian's career and our life. But I might put myself in physical danger from the people he was blackmailing. If I stayed silent, I was complicit in a major financial crime and living with a criminal. I called an old university acquaintance, now a high-powered ethics lawyer in New York, and told him I had a hypothetical case about a lawyer using confidential divorce information to leverage a corporate merger. I didn't mention Adrian's name. His response was immediate and chilling. Hypothetically, that lawyer is flirting with criminal charges for obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and potentially extortion. If he's leveraging a federal politician, the FBI would be involved. And the lawyer's wife, if she knows and doesn't report it, could face scrutiny as an accessory. That was the line drawn in the sand. I was an accessory if I stayed silent. When Adrian came home, I noticed a fresh, deep scratch on the mahogany desk in his study. It was a small, insignificant detail, but it symbolized the mess he was making of our carefully polished life. That night, I started quietly moving assets. I didn't take large sums, but I opened a small independent safety deposit box under my maiden name. I began collecting hard copies of all my personal documents: birth certificate, passport, social security card. I was preparing my exit strategy, creating a lifeboat for myself. My calm exterior hid a deep panic. I knew that the day I chose to confront Adrian or leave him would be the most dangerous day of my life. I was trapped between my devotion to the truth and the physical threat posed by the secrets my husband was guarding. The weight of the secret became physical. I couldn't look at Adrian without seeing a potential federal defendant. The mahogany desk scratch now symbolized a deeper fissure in our life, a constant, visible reminder that my husband was dismantling our security brick by brick, trading our peace for professional ambition. I knew I couldn't simply disappear. Adrian was too smart, too well connected. If he sensed I was leaving, he would bury the secret deeper and likely try to neutralize me legally, perhaps even framing me for something. I needed leverage equal to the threat he faced. I needed him to confess, or at least detail the crime, on record. I decided to set a trap. I bought a tiny, high-quality voice recorder disguised as a USB drive. I tested it rigorously. My plan was to provoke him into revealing enough details about the Senator T situation to protect myself if the FBI ever came knocking. I waited for the perfect moment. A stressful Friday evening. Adrian had just spent hours on the phone with his firm, clearly rattled about developments in the Geneva case. He was drinking heavily, which usually lowered his guard. I approached him in the living room, the disguised USB drive resting innocently on the coffee table, recording. "Adrian," I started, keeping my voice low and concerned, "we need to talk about the stress. You look terrible. It's more than just the merger, isn't it? Is it the senator?" He flinched visibly. "It's nothing you need to worry about, Kate." "It's confidential client strategy." "Client strategy that involves divorce papers disappearing?" I challenged, making sure to drop the specific chilling phrase from the note. His eyes narrowed. "Where did you hear that? I told you not to touch my things." "I found the note," I stated calmly, "the one from the burner phone number. Call me if you want the divorce papers to disappear." "Adrian, who is blackmailing you?" He laughed, a harsh, empty sound. "No one is blackmailing me, Kate. I'm doing what is necessary to secure a billion-dollar merger, and that requires leverage." He confessed, not out of remorse, but out of arrogant necessity. The alcohol loosened his tongue, and my feigned naivete provided the opening. "The senator is a rat," Adrian spat, pacing the room. "He tried to block our merger to save his own dirty money. His wife's divorce filing included an affidavit detailing his offshore accounts he used to hide millions. It's enough to get him investigated by the SEC and potentially face jail time." I acquired that affidavit, and I gave him an ultimatum: sign the merger approval, and I keep the affidavit sealed. Refuse, and I leak the financial section to the press and the federal authorities. He stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes blazing with a mixture of pride and desperation. "I'm not the victim, Kate. I'm the predator, and I won. The senator caved this morning. He signed the papers. The merger goes through. I'm going to make partner. I maintained my shock civilian act, but that's extortion, Adrian. That's a crime. What if the senator gets revenge? What if those people come after us? They won't, he hissed, grabbing my shoulders. They can't afford to. The senator's life is ruined if this comes out. But if you ever tell anyone, Kate, I swear to God I will deny everything. I will claim you fabricated the note out of jealousy. I will discredit you, and I will ensure you are left with nothing. Do you understand? Say nothing. We are safe only if you are silent. I nodded slowly, my heart pounding, but a triumphant coldness settling in my stomach. The entire confession, the explicit details of the extortion, the threat against me, it was all captured on the tiny USB drive on the coffee table. I had the insurance policy I needed. The next day, Adrian was back to his charming, sober self, acting as if the conversation never happened, but the tape was my shield. My next move was tactical. I had to leave, but I needed to do it in a way that couldn't be traced to the crime. I finally contacted a divorce lawyer, but not Eleanor Vance. I found a small, discreet firm outside the city. I told them I was seeking a quiet separation due to irreconcilable differences, making no mention of the crime. This was my decoy. However, I also contacted the FBI's anonymous tip line. I didn't give them Adrian's name. I gave them a date, a corporate merger name, Orion Zenith, and a highly specific, verifiable clue. Check the sealed financial affidavits in the Eleanor T. divorce, filing for a connection to corporate merger leverage. I gave them enough to start an investigation without directly incriminating myself or Adrian. I planted the seed of the truth, knowing the FBI's subpoena power would eventually force Adrian to expose himself. I finalized my plans. I moved my essentials to a friend's vacant apartment across town, telling Adrian I was going on an emergency reporting trip for my journalism work. It was the perfect, believable cover. On the morning I was set to leave, I left a final, handwritten note on his desk. Not the divorce notice, but a simple, direct message. Adrian, I can't be complicit in a crime. The price of your success is too high for my conscience. When the inevitable comes, know that I tried to save you from yourself. I left the house, the small USB recorder tucked safely in my pocket. I knew the moment Adrian read that note, he wouldn't panic about losing a wife. He would panic about the confession I might have recorded. My departure wasn't a sad goodbye. It was a desperate race against time. I was now a fugitive from my own marriage, fleeing a secret that was chasing us both. I had planted the evidence with the federal authorities, and now I had to wait for the blast. I spent the first few days in Sarah's empty apartment in a state of hypervigilance. Every siren, every unexpected knock at the door sent a jolt of panic through me. I was waiting for two things: Adrian's frantic, aggressive contact and the quiet, official knock of the FBI. Adrian's reaction was exactly as predicted. When he found my note, he didn't call my friends or my family. He called my work, demanding to know where my reporting trip was taking me. He then realized the truth, that I hadn't just left him. I had left the secret. His first contact with me was via a frantic, chilling text message. "Where is it, Kate?" You know what I'm talking about. You took something that doesn't belong to you. If you go to the police, you destroy everything. I will ensure you go down with me. You were complicit. Come home now. He knew I had the recording. He knew I had leverage. And his threat that I was complicit was precisely why I had made that anonymous call to the FBI tip line before I left. I didn't respond to his texts or calls. I instructed Sarah, my trusted friend who owned the apartment, to screen her calls and tell Adrian she had no idea where I was. I cut myself off, entering a legal and emotional lockdown. The silence lasted for almost a week, a tense, unnatural quiet that was more terrifying than his threats. Adrian was a predator, and his silence meant he was calculating his next move. Then the storm broke, but not where Adrian expected it. I saw the news first, a major headline on a reputable financial website. Senator T resigns amid unconfirmed rumors of offshore financial misconduct. Corporate merger halted. The anonymous tip had worked. The SEC, or more likely the FBI, had started digging into the sealed divorce records and the suspicious timing of the corporate merger approvals. I knew Adrian was facing an internal investigation at his firm, and soon a federal one. His world was crumbling, and he would be desperate. 2 days after the news broke, the knock came, but it wasn't at my temporary apartment. It was a call from Eleanor Vance, the divorce lawyer I had initially consulted and secretly brought back into the loop after getting my recording. "Kate, are you safe?" Eleanor's voice was low and urgent. "The FBI is at your house. They're asking about Adrian's firm, Senator T, and something called the Eleanor T Affidavit. They want to speak with you immediately, but as a witness, not a target. Do not go to the Seattle office." I gave Eleanor the location of Sarah's apartment and waited. Within an hour, 2 federal agents, a stern, middle-aged woman and a polite younger man, were sitting in Sarah's living room. They weren't aggressive. They were meticulously professional. "Mrs. Hayes," the female agent, Agent Reyes, began, "we are investigating potential federal extortion and financial crimes related to the recent Orion Corp merger. Your husband, Adrian Hayes, is a person of interest. We understand you may have information regarding his unusual legal strategy in a concurrent divorce case." I knew this was my moment. I looked them straight in the eye and chose my words with the care of a tightrope walker. "Agents," I said, handing them the USB drive, "I believe this contains the information you are looking for. I left my husband because I refused to be complicit in a crime. This is a recording of Adrian detailing the entire extortion plot against Senator T, using the divorce affidavit as leverage." The agents exchanged a look. They immediately took the drive to their secure briefcase. Then came the interrogation. It was hours long. They wanted to know everything. When did I find a note? Did I know about the offshore accounts? Did I assist Adrian in his crimes? I answered truthfully, meticulously detailing how Adrian's actions were hidden from me, how I started my own investigation to uncover the truth, and how his final threats forced me into hiding. I emphasized that I had sought advice and immediately contacted the tip line before leaving him. My foresight in recording the confession and contacting the authorities anonymously was what saved me from being viewed as an accessory. "Mrs. Hayes," Agent Reyes finally said, closing her notebook, "your evidence is substantial. We will be seeking an immediate warrant for Mr. Hayes' arrest on multiple federal charges, including extortion and conspiracy. We believe your account is truthful, but you must remain available to us." The same evening, I watched the news from Sarah's apartment. The familiar polished facade of my own home was now swarming with federal vehicles. I saw the flash of the camera as Adrian was led out, handcuffs hidden beneath his suit jacket, his face a mask of shock and utter defeat. He wasn't the powerful, arrogant lawyer anymore. He was a perp. Watching my husband's public humiliation was devastating, but it confirmed my choice. I had sacrificed my marriage to save my soul and prevent further complicity. I had exposed a crime that would have otherwise buried us both. The legal battle was just beginning, but the moral one was over. I was finally free of the silence and the suffocating secret. Adrian's arrest was the climax of the fear and shock I had been living through. Watching his pathetic state on television was the final, painful confirmation that the man I had shared years with was nothing but a lie. Eleanor Vance filed for divorce the very next morning. Because the dissolution of the marriage coincided with Adrian's federal arrest, the legal process was swift and clean. His struggles with the federal investigation and criminal charges were a clear advantage for me. The grounds for the annulment weren't just irreconcilable differences, but also gross breach of marital duties and moral turpitude. Eleanor was ruthless in the settlement negotiations. Adrian's lawyers attempted to fight, but Eleanor had the irrefutable proof of Adrian's federal crimes, the audio recording, and my FBI testimony confirming my innocence. The final divorce decree was devastating for Adrian. Marital home. The house was awarded entirely to me. Asset division. I received the majority of the joint investment portfolio, roughly 80%, given that Adrian had lost his standing and career due to the nature of the case. Financial restitution. Adrian was forced to reimburse me for all legal and forensic accounting fees and the emotional stress caused by the litigation. Adrian's career was over. His law firm immediately scrubbed his name from their records. Following the mention of his name in the Senator T case fallout, Adrian's ambitious ascent turned into a humiliating public dissent. The irony was crushing. The "you'll be left with nothing" scenario he had threatened me with was precisely what happened to him. He lived a life of guilt and ambition, but the only thing he was left with was the potential of spending years in federal prison. Adrian's lawyers made one final request, in exchange for me agreeing not to leak the audio recording publicly and to refrain from testifying against him in the criminal trial. They would expedite the financial settlement. I agreed. For me, justice meant financial security and peace. Public revenge was unnecessary. The months following the divorce were the hardest. The house was silent, but now filled with the exhaustion of grief, not the tension of the crime. I constantly questioned myself. What if I hadn't found that note? I would likely have stayed silent, become complicit in Adrian's crimes, and one day been arrested as the spouse of a felon. But I broke that silence. I lived the story of a wife who was a witness to her husband's crimes, but who risked everything to prove her innocence. That small, crumpled note exposed not just Adrian's guilt, but also my own necessary courage. I rebuilt my life. I sold the house. The walls were too full of the echo of lies. I used the money wisely, reinvested in my journalism career, and finally established a life where I slept soundly, knowing I was only accountable to my own conscience. I no longer live the perfect life defined by luxury and ambition. I have a life that is peaceful, honest, and safe. Adrian's final fate was sealed after months of legal wrangling. Due to the severity of his crimes and their impact on federal politics, he was sentenced to a lengthy prison term. The last I heard, he was navigating the reality of prison life, stripped of his prestige and fortune. Sometimes I wonder why Adrian was so careless with that note in his briefcase. Perhaps subconsciously, he was looking for someone to end the nightmare. Perhaps he wanted me to stop him. Regardless, my role in this story was transforming from a devoted wife to a witness to a crime, and ultimately to a strong woman who risked everything to secure her own survival. I exposed Adrian's lies and saved myself. My life was not the price of his crime. My life became the proof of his downfall. And that, for me, was enough justice. Thank you for listening to this difficult confession. We are so grateful to share these stories with you. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments section below.